Welcome to Exploring the Mystical Side of Life with your host, Linda Lang.
Hi, this is Linda Lang from ThoughtChange.com. We are here exploring the mystical side of life again today, and we are going to have some fun. If you enjoy our conversations, please make sure you subscribe, follow the channel, share it with your friends. Today, I have Sue Chard here with me. Sue is a trance channeler, and I have goosebumps even as I say that. And she channels the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley. Welcome, Sue.
Thank you very much.
How does a person become a trance channeler? Like, how did that happen for you?
I was going into trance before I knew what trance was. It was only after starting to sit in a development circle, talking to a lady who's been in spiritualism and mediumship a lot longer than myself, and she identified it for me. And she said, "I think you're going into trance." And she invited me along to her house and to sit for her and see what happened. And the very first time there, I was really nervous, you can imagine that. And I went into trance, and lovely Native American Indians were there and talking to her. That was a great experience, you see, but I was doing anyway. I didn't know. I didn't know. It seemed once I stepped on my spiritual path, lots of things just happened. I mean, that was a long time ago. That was a long time ago. Many people have spoken through me through trance. A lot of them are musicians, as it happens. Also, people like Merlin, Merlin, the great magician, Mozart. But, as far as the one, the main one, which is the lovely Elvis, he surprised me. So it was 2006. I remember it very clearly. I've always been an Elvis fan. I've always loved Elvis. I've got older brothers and sisters always playing his records. And I was doing some ironing, hate doing the ironing. I was playing his CD, as I normally do, to take my mind off it. So I was just there ironing and listening. And then I realized I could see Elvis in his white, sort of typical Vegas white jumpsuit. And he's just smiling at me. And I thought, wow, this is some fantasy. And I was just enjoying the fantasy. Then he came up real close and he said to me, "What would you like to see me in?" And I went, "Oh, black leathers, of course." And so it's as if he walked past me, so behind me, then he said, "What do you think of this?" And I turned around and looked, and there he is in the black leathers. And he was just looking back at me. I could see his back, and he's just sort of got his head just like that, looking at me, very teasing. He's a tease. And he said, "Do you like this?" And then he disappeared. 3 weeks later, my name had been on a waiting list to go and be a guest at a trance circle. So I went along there and sat in the darkened room there with everyone else. And I think the first person that came to the trance meeting was JF Kennedy, who was talking. And then as he was sort of stepping back, you could see somebody else has come in and the lips started to curl up. And I thought, oh, could it be? And it was Elvis. And, he was there and talking. And then he turned to me and he said, "We've spoken before, haven't we?" And I said, "Oh, was that for real?" "Sure was." I said, "No, you wouldn't speak to me." He said, "Why not?" I said, "But you're Elvis Presley." And he said, "Don't put me on a pedestal. Don't put me on a pedestal." And I was just completely taken back by that. But it was him just proving to me that was real. And there's some real funny stories, Linda, I could tell you with Elvis, where he kind of almost got me into trouble, but not quite. But he's pushed the boundaries a bit, and I can hear him in my voice. And he knows what he's doing. He's trying to break down the boundaries.
When I was talking to Sue before we hit record, Elvis actually just came in and took over the conversation and could see that I was hoping he would step back a little bit so I would actually have the opportunity to talk a little bit with Sue about what it's like for her, because I would really like to know, what is it like for you when Elvis or anyone else comes in? Are you consciously aware that they're there and you know what they're saying, or Do you go somewhere else and they just completely take over?
It varies, and they are very much in control. But often I'm aware of what is being said at the time, but when I come back, I've forgotten it. But of course, if I'm completely switched off, then no, I don't recall. It's like a part of my life that I can't remember. It is amazing, and you know, to do trance anyway is amazing. It's the perfect evidence in many ways. You know, when I was doing the trance sittings, it was recorded. Most of the people had a sit-in. They were so pleased because of the evidence that was there. It proved to them it was their loved one, which is wonderful. But Elvis, after he passed over, he said then when he, you know, sort of from the spirit side of life, when he could see what he was about, he was just focusing on me, and he had a long wait until I stepped on my spiritual path. I know that I've come to trust him completely, like you do, you know, with all your guides. You just trust him, you know, entirely.
How long have you been channeling Elvis?
It started not long after the fantasy when I was ironing in 2006. He would just pop up now and then. He is very naughty sometimes, I tell you. But, you know, he's just being the Elvis that he was. You know, that's what spirit does. You know, for you to totally believe that this is them, they got to give the evidence that this is how I was there. He's so funny, such laughter, raucous, and people. I've seen women blush. There's one of my friends, he kissed the back of her hand, and when I opened my eyes, she was just blushing. It's so funny. It's so funny, isn't it? So those who know me well, you know, they're used to him talking. But he does talk sensibly sometimes.
That's really interesting, Sue, because I think there's a lot of confusion about what happens when you cross over. If you keep your personality or a greater perspective, so maybe you understand things more spiritually.
With each life we have a spirit. Yeah. So we have a human body and we have a spirit. And the spirit is of the consciousness, the mind. When the human body dies, the brain dies with it, but the mind, the consciousness, doesn't. And the expression I've been taught to use is that the whole of that life is held as a memory, almost in a memory chip. Imagine it, the whole life, everything in that life is held in like a memory chip. And the spirit has that same characteristics, where they can go into the memory of that life and they can bring themselves out. They bring photos of themselves and they show us mediums photos of themselves. So because they don't look like that anymore, because they're just beautiful vibrating energy and light and color, aren't they? So they show us photos of what they did look like. So we can see them, describe them, and, you know, I think with the voice it's a bit different. They seem to be able to transfer the voice into us, you know, even though they've not got voice boxes there. You see, so I just think it's just amazing. It's clever what spirit is able to do. So within the memory of that whole life is what they bring to us when they want to, when they need to prove it's them. That's exactly what we need from spirit, isn't it? Is the evidence of who they were, and they bring that to us by retrieving, just plucking pieces out, things that are their memory of that life. So our mind, our consciousness does not die. It lives forever. So that's how spirit has put it to me. Now, even though I work so much with Elvis, and he seems to be the main guy and everything, I work with Archangel Michael. He's taught me so much. And he has taught me many of these things to understand, you know, what it is. If we actually see them as a spirit, we wouldn't recognize them. They just show themselves as they were, because it's in that memory within their consciousness.
And I would imagine that not all spirits or crossed over loved ones are as anxious to talk to humans as, say, Elvis is. I've had a number of medium readings, and, you know, some relatives are always there and some of them never come, or the medium will actually try to bring them through and they're like, nope, yeah. They don't want to come.
Yeah, totally. It does, of course, depend on the medium, their energy and where they're at within themselves. It depends on the recipient. The other thing, it does depend. Spirit world gives us what we need, not necessarily what we want. And I know I've done readings, and there's one friend I've done a reading for, and it just wasn't working with the family because Spirit wanted to talk to her about her spiritual pathway. So I've learned I mustn't try and control and try and humanize anything to do with Spirit, because they're the ones in the greater world that know so much more than I do. And go with what they say there.
And you make a really good point. I'd never considered before that the
Yeah.
medium also plays a part in, it's like a little triad going here, the person getting the message, the person giving the message, and the person that the message is coming through. And they all need to be of that right vibration in order for it to actually manifest.
That's absolutely correct. And I say to people, if people come to me and they're quite nervous, just try and relax, nothing to worry about, and that often works, but you do get the odd ones. They've come fixated and they know what they want to come through. And if they're not hearing that, then it's no good. Yeah, it takes all sorts, but it absolutely does depend on the voice and the energy of the recipient. It's not just me. If you send your energy out, it's not just helping me, it's helping your loved ones who's trying to work with me to give you a message.
And you made such a beautiful point earlier when you talked about how we have a tendency to humanize all these spiritual concepts and spiritual wisdom, the spirit world, even in general, right? We know such a tiny fraction of what actually is, and yet we project what we think on it.
Right. I totally agree, and I hear it often, people saying things. I often think you just humanize, people humanize their pets, don't they? But they humanize spirit. And I even hear people say that spirit is a greater intelligence, which they are. They know so much than us. And then in the next breath, they're saying, yes, but you can't do this, you can't do that. Why don't you just trust in spirit? They don't want to get us into trouble, that they want to be able to work with us to help humans, don't they? That's basically what they're doing. And, so many rules and regulations are brought in, even some of the big establishments. In my mind, they've got it wrong in a few places. I think they need to walk it as well, walk the walk, not just talk the talk. But, it's humans. They humanize everything. It's the wrong way around, isn't it? It's as if humans are the main thing, and they certainly are not, are they?
Sue and I recorded Elvis twice, and the following is the best audio of both of them.
Hi there, Linda. You're giving me you're giving me the thumbs up now. Then I can come forward. I can speak for myself, and there's just something about my girl's voice when my girl is talking. With the intention of working, I just come in on her voice. It's hard to explain to anyone in the human form. It's hard to explain to them because they may not understand some of the things I might use there to try to explain the situation here as it is there. But I guess just saying that I come in on her voice and when she's talking, and I love what she's already told you is absolutely true and correct. That we have a lot of fun. We work and we have a lot of fun too, and it's such a pleasure and to have a voice, as Elvis Presley. I sure did like the sound of my own voice there, whether I was singing or whether I was talking. And I'm the same here. I like to hear my voice, whether I'm singing or talking, and I do enjoy conversing with other people. I'm not sure it does give me great pleasure to do that. you know, I like socializing. I really do love to socialize. And
Elvis, are you willing to answer some questions for us?
yeah, you know, I do my very best there for you. I do my very best.
Thank you, Elvis. So, my first question is, when you're on the other side, when you're in the spirit world, are you Elvis or are you your soul and only aware of the life you lived as Elvis?
Yeah, that sure is a good question there. And I got to kind of find the words now to try and explain the situation there. You know, and Elvis being part of the soul there, but you know there are other lives that I've had, but where I wasn't Elvis, I was somebody else there, and they are also part of the soul, part of my soul there. You know, so I guess the answer really to your question there is that I take on the Elvis when I need to. Do you understand that? When I need to, I try to find better words to use here, for you to understand this better. That I don't spend as an aspect of my soul there. There are many aspects of that soul there. I don't just sort of fly around or float around in a white jumpsuit. You know, I don't do that, but that I exist a lot in the memory of that life.
How do you fill your time on the other side, if there is such a thing as time on the other side?
You know, there is no such thing as time, you know, and in the vibration that we exist in, if you wish, where we live, there is no such thing. Because if I were to say, children, it's a little bit ambiguous here, but if I were to say everything has its time, it's done in its time. You know, there is no time. Seeing is believing. I would say that here. Seeing is believing, and you know that everything is happening at the same time. There's that word there again. You see, and you know, I can move around as many others can move around there within the energy that we exist in. You know that I can be in any part of your world at any time I wish. At any time I wish. I'm not the only one. You know, I'm not a special case here. I'm not the only one. It's just the way it is. There are, you know, within I call it the spiritual because you understand what I mean. Any of us can be wherever we want to be in the world, you know, and who we want to be too. You know, so it's all done by our thought process there, and do we have a plan? We sure do have a plan.
Did you fulfill the plan of your life while you were here on Earth as Elvis?
The answer to that has to be no.
There was more. There was more that your soul had desired to experience.
Sure. You know, there's a lot looking back on my life, and I've been there many times, and I always hit an emotional button there when I do cast my mind into the love of Elvis there. There are definitely areas there that I could have handled so much better. You know that everybody's life has some good, and it has some not some good, and you know, and temptations too. You know, and there sure were many temptations in my life as Elvis. You know, I've had other lives there that so much simpler, where there wouldn't be the temptations that there are, you know, as Elvis president. And I missed opportunity where friends tried to help me to sort myself out there, but There just became a point there that I didn't know how to sort myself out. And then I reached a point where I didn't want to sort myself out. Would I do things differently if I were able to come back as president in my life again? And I sure would do things differently. There's a lot of regrets there in that life. I have to say that there's a lot of regrets there. And there's people I hurt. The more famous I became, the more horrible person I became. I got lost. I got lost in it all. There sure are things I would do different. I'd like to say to all those that I caused disharmony to those I caused hurt and upset there. I'm truly sorry. Of course, many of those are on this side of life here. And I've paid my dues there and shared my regrets and my sorrow, for the way I behaved there.
So, Elvis, what I'm hearing is that for each of us, that we do have a plan and we also have free will. That can change our life experience.
Sure. That's exactly. There are different ideas, different beliefs about the human life. Some people think it's set in concrete there, which it is not. And you mentioned the free will there, and that's the one that trips you up. And you just have money and fame tonight. And the momentum, in anyone's life as a human in the Earth Foundation. It's about staying in the light and the love. That's what it's about, really. For all the temptations there in your life is to overcome them and to not let them lead you astray. And then so getting your fulfillment in the ways you shouldn't be getting your fulfillments. And it's a slippery slope. If you don't realize soon enough and after you act on it there, then you're just sliding down that slippery slope.
Do you still make music in the spirit world?
Sure do. There's many a musician in the spirit world, many a musician in there. It's a pleasure. The spirit world is music. There is music everywhere. And you have to bear in mind that each one of us, within our own consciousness, if we choose music, we get music. It's just a reminder there. The mind is so powerful. The consciousness is so powerful. And as you know, darling, the physical body doesn't exist in the spirit world. That's what dies there, and it's just the spirit there is free and to reconnect with the soul, and the consciousness is so powerful, even more powerful within the spirit world than it is within the human and within the earth energy. There, I have to add here that some humans have got a more powerful consciousness than others. Depending there on their lifestyle and what they believe in, and how they develop their minds. Because minds are powerful, thoughts are powerful, and within the spirit world, the thought is everything. I just try to explain this a little bit more. Like myself and many other musicians that are in the spirit world. We get together, we have the common thread of music within our soul energy. And, if I said we get together there and we hang out and we make music, just like in the days when we were on the earth, maybe not together there. And this is what we do in this circle. So there's many a musician they get a very warm welcome, and come and join the band. But the other thing, from the spirit world, they inspire a human on the earth energy. They might inspire them with writing lyrics, writing music, and singing. We know who has got the ability, who's a good instrument there to channel the music.
So, Elvis, it's almost time for us to wrap up. Is there any message that you would really like to leave us all with today?
Oh, there sure is. There sure is. The life you're living right now, you only got it once. Don't mess up. Don't mess up like I did. Fame and fortune, it's a killer. It's a killer. You got to be careful, and you got to keep your balance in your mind and in all aspects of your life. Keep the balance there. Don't let anything take over. Don't be selfish. And always keep your thoughts and actions in the light, in the positive, in the light. For in everyone's life, there's light and there's dark. And the dark is there to experience, but then you get right back into the light there. And just take a look at yourself every now and then, and just say to yourself, am I getting this right here, or am I getting this wrong here? And if you're getting it wrong, then do something about it. Don't be afraid to say, I got it wrong. I need to restart.
Good message. Thank you, Elvis. Can we have Sue back? Hi, Sue.
Hi, Linda. I'm back.
Do you remember where you went?
No.
Not at all.
He steps in front of me, and I'm behind him.
Well, it's just about time for us to wrap up. Is there any message you'd like to leave the listeners with, Sue?
The spirit world, those in the spirit world, whoever they are, the famous and the not famous, all the angels, they're all real. And I would say to those who are struggling with believing in the spirit world and the spirits and the light and the love and the awesome power, it's real. And I encourage everybody to find out more about it, to find their spiritual pathway.
So thank you, Sue, for joining me today and bringing Elvis for our listeners. And thank you for listening to this week's edition of Exploring the Mystical Side of Life. You will find all of our conversations on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio. Come and visit me at thoughtchange.com. That's it for this week. Bye for now.